Alrighty, welcome to the continuation of Project 3. So welcome any live stream tier patrons, online students that are here watching this live. One thing I want to mention, as there was some confusion over this, is that the beginning of these lessons are for the live stream tier patrons. That gives them the ability to watch each lesson as it happens. I found out that the link is the same between the live stream and then when this is a pre-recorded video. So what I'm going to do is edit the post so that in the beginning the live stream tier members can see the lesson live, and then after it is done being filmed live, then the post will change so that all online students can see. So hopefully that's not too confusing, because it keeps everything a little bit more organized. And yeah, just feel free to ask me anything while I'm painting. I'm actually going to change tactics a little bit with the underpainting with the girl with the pearl earring, with a pearl earring. So what I'm going to do is actually use the full value range for the underpainting and fully develop the underpainting before going in with color. If you look into the photo reference, if you go to Google Arts and Culture, and definitely if you can't find Google Arts and Culture, if you can't find the original reference, I'll send you a link, or I'll just post the link on the post. So just to clarify anything, and also just to clarify the confusion with the lesson numbers and the projects, I will put the lesson number at the end and the project number first, because right now we're working on both project 2 and project 3. So just not to confuse anything. So I'm going to be using a black and white underpainting versus a raw umber or French umber and flake white underpainting. And that is because if you look closely into the Vermeer, there aren't really too many of the typical underpainting nuances that you see in the corners, but rather Vermeer most likely had drawn everything out either with charcoal or like this. Either way, Vermeer would have most likely started with simple outlines like this. And then it is my belief that Vermeer would have gone in with a full monochromatic underpainting. So that's why I'm using black and white. Mind you, if you're using Cobra, remember Cobra takes forever to dry, and you can use a little bit of the Griffin Alkyd or any Alkyd based oil paints into your mixture. I'm using straight Alkyd oil paints, so straight Griffin Alkyd Ivory Black and straight Griffin Alkyd Titanium White, because I'm not really going to be going for impasto with the Vermeer. Vermeer is more of a study in a smooth finish. So I just have my solvent to the left here, which is distilled turpentine. You can use whichever. You can use odorless mineral spirits if you're using Cobra. You can use water. You can use spike lavender, which is the preferred, which I actually just ran out of, I believe. So I'm gonna have to order some new spike lavender. And I'm going to be building this with very transparent layers of oil paint. The thing is that each layer is going to dry really fast for me, so we may be doing quite a few layers for the underpainting, and that's an advantage of having this set up, being able to upload 3 lessons a week. So again, not to confuse anyone, I'll upload in the title of each of these uploads. I will put the project number first, so you don't feel like you've missed anything. And if you feel like you've missed anything, remember there's going to be playlists. So for example, this is the second video featuring project 3. So after 2 or 3 videos, then I create a playlist for each project. So this one will most likely have a playlist either this week or next week, just in case you feel like you've missed anything with project 3 or any of the others. Remember, there will be playlists, and some folks are actually already ahead of me, so awesome. So some have already put in a tone for the background, as it's very important for the chiaroscuro effect that Vermeer has. So Awesome, awesome. Kudos to you, who has already put in the background tone. So you're definitely ahead of me there. And I'm just following along the background. I'm aware of certain drawing mistakes, which are just, they're inherent. It happens with the beginning of the drawing. So again, whoever is watching this live, feel free to ask me anything while this is being filmed live. And remember, those of you that are watching this afterwards, you can always ask me anything on the messenger. Mind you, some days is a little difficult for me to get to the phone and message just because there's family activities and things. But usually if it's not a Sunday, I respond very fast. So right now it's Monday morning, and I have quite a few messages to get to, which is great. I have already actually read through some of the messages just to make sure. That's why I mentioned that I'm going to have the project name first. So project number first. So that is, project 3 in future uploads. So I'm just following along with the background. And if you've never used a alkyd based oil paint, or should I say just alkyd oil paint, definitely give it a try. If you're interested, I can send you some links. There's no lead in this. There shouldn't be any reason that it won't be, there shouldn't be any difficulties in finding this wherever you're located. And the nice thing about this is that it'll pretty much settle in within a couple hours. And I'm purposefully not painting as thin into the background. And I'm not using any extra medium, any oil, any solvent. Come to find out, at least from what I've read, the alkyd, what makes this a fast drying oil paint, alkyd's pretty archival. So that's a good thing, right? And I'm just thinning out little by little, not too much. See, if the paint starts to drip, which it isn't here, then it's too thin. And to answer another question that I will soon get back to you through the messenger, but just to answer another question for in case anyone else has this question. And remember, feel free to ask me anything about the behind the scenes that I uploaded. I don't know, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago now, featuring the Nelson Shanks. I'm actually going to change to a smaller brush. The Nelson Shanks that I was testing out the live stream for the first time, the live stream setup. That one is a studio painting, so that one there isn't any footage associated with it. Instead, you got a behind the scenes look into one of my studio paintings. That painting is still, in progress. I can do another behind the scenes on it if anyone is interested. But of course, you'd have to let me know before I work on it again. And I'm referring to the one with the bird, the Nelson Shanks, the female model with the bird still life element on her head. Now I'm aware of certain drawing mistakes here. The nose needs to be a little bit longer. The chin needs to go in a little more, which we're about to do. The hat needs to move back a little more, but the important thing right now for me is to build up the surface. So here I'll do this little change here. I'm moving this in. And you want to keep your background, that's all down to preference. Sorry. But I like to have a kind of a brushy touch to the background and build the layers through those kind of brushy marks. Of course, eventually we'll get to a much more solid background, and purposefully thinning out the paint actually prevents it from being too dark because I am using ivory black. Now you can use the French umber or the raw umber. If you have the Rublev, then it would be French umber, if you have the, you know, any other brand, raw umber. I will say, if you do have traditional oil paints or basically anything that's not alkyd, you definitely want to thin the paint out for this layer in particular. I'm using the alkyd, as I mentioned before, just because I know from experience that a fully monochromatic underpainting using black and white without some kind of alkyd base takes a long time to dry. So just letting you know ahead of time. And that's not a problem really. So if you do this without using a fast drying oil paint, you'll be fine. Don't worry, you'll be fine. You just have to put the painting aside for about a week for it to dry thoroughly. If it's Cobra, it might take about 2 weeks to dry thoroughly. So if you're using Cobra, definitely use the a little bit of the alkyd oil paint into it, and it still remains pretty water cleanable, even with a little tiny bit of the traditional oil paint with the alkyd like we have here. So I'm just walking my way down, and the difference with the alkyd, it's almost like acrylic in the sense that you want to clean off the brush every now and then, because it will start to tack up on the brush, but nowhere near like acrylic. And that's why I really feel like I needed to redo this video. One reason I felt like I needed to redo the pearl earring is that the first time I did this, I rushed it. I'll admit that I rushed it on the YouTube channel because I was trying to get something done in a week, even less than a week, and in a week's time to have a video out featuring the pearl earrings. So that was a mistake. So this is me learning from my mistakes and guiding you through. So many years of experience has taken me to this point where I can confidently guide you through this method. So now that the background has its fair share of dark color, I'm now going to go ahead and start to clean off the brushes. So if you have the alkyd based oil paints, I would suggest right now, so after filling in the background, and of course when you're using faster drying oil paints like this, only put a little bit at a time. I put a lot of the titanium white because it actually doesn't dry as fast as the alkyd ivory black. So I'm going to lift this for a second. And again, with Vermeer, definitely you really want to be smooth. Paint as smooth as you can. And that panel that I suggested is pretty perfect for this. So again, feel free to ask me anything. Anyone that's here watching the lesson live, don't worry about distracting me. Any kind of questions always makes the dialogue more fun and more informative. So now this brush, since I really care for these brushes, into the distilled turpentine it goes. And again, you can use anything. You can use odorless mineral spirits or spiked lavender, whichever. You can use your Gamsol. It's fine. You don't have to use the spiked lavender. Hey, Kathy. What do I mix with the alkyd? Thank you for the question. Alkyd paints when I do the background. I thin it out. And I'm using the alkyd just because I want it to dry faster. I could have easily went with my with my Williamsburg ivory black. This is the Winsor Newton Griffin alkyd ivory black. So just turpentine, just thinned it out with a little bit of distilled turpentine. And again, with Cobra, you can use water, Kathy, but I would suggest introducing a tiny bit of the alkyd, Winsor Newton alkyd, because it will take a little longer to dry. And the reason I'm doing this is because the Vermeer is very value based, and a lot of cool colors surrounding the skin tones and the lead tin yellow color that we have here in the Vermeer, in the original, that hopefully you can see the photo reference. So that's why we're going to be building the underpainting this way. So yep, just turpentine. And feel free, anyone, to ask me anything. and welcome to the live lesson. And as I mentioned in the beginning, the links are actually the same. According to YouTube, the links are the same when it comes to a when this is live and then when it's pre-recorded. So everyone watching, once this stream is done, I will change the post, the original post, because it's the same link. There's no reason for me to post it twice. So the post will change and it'll be available for everyone else after the live stream is over. So hopefully that's not too confusing. Now I actually have to put a little more of the Griffin Alkyd Ivory Black. Hey Kathy. Okay, yeah, Spike Lavender. If you have Spike Lavender, definitely. So if you have Spike Lavender and then the Griffin Alkyd, that would be really good. Kathy, just know that if you use Spike Lavender in the beginning of any painting, if you use any of the solvents, traditional solvents, I wouldn't suggest going in with the water mixed into your water mixable oil paints. Hopefully that's not too confusing. It's just that if you start out with water, some kind of water mixture, then you can add oil. But if you start out with some kind of oil like the Spike Lavender, then it's advisable to, go with, just stick with that. So if you start with Spike Lavender, I would suggest sticking with the Spike Lavender. Hopefully that's not too confusing. Now I'm mixing up a little bit of a gray, and you see this in the original Vermeer. So right here, so we're going to start right here. So again, if you look at the original image, there are actually gray undertones on the clothing here. So we're going to very carefully draw. So is that okay, Kathy? My suggestion, if you start with the Spike Lavender, I'd probably stick with it throughout the painting. And that was a great question. So this pretty much is the same for everyone. So if you start out with Spike Lavender or some kind of oil, I would recommend sticking with it throughout the entire painting. And that is for everyone that's using water mixable, or combination of traditional and water mixable. So let's use a little more ivory black. So I am going to draw this little plane change in the clothing. Yep. All right, Kathy. I'm glad that makes sense. And with this one, I recommend starting with the clothing surrounding the face, then work into the face, because Vermeer painted this so delicate. It's kind of hard to just jump right into the face. But what's nice is that you're able to see the gray underneath, and I wonder if that has something to do with the recent conservation. Not too recent, but this one has gone over under conservation in the past, I think 50 years. And I fortunately was able to see this painting in person and in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York sometime before the world ended. And what I noticed, what struck me immediately, is how smooth the surface is. Like if you look at an Ang, it's a really smooth painting, right? Also pronounced or spelled Jean Dominique Ingrace. That's how it's. Whoa, look at that. See the difference between flake white and titanium white. Look at that. The titanium is trying to run away. Wow, get back over here. Yeah, the titanium white is it's a little less thick when you compare it to the flake white. But again, this is the Alkyd titanium white. That's why I have it. So one thing I noticed is how smooth this painting is. So we're also considering the surface as we do this. And in the beginning, of course, I should reiterate, I'm not using any medium, just the solvent to thin out the paint and the paint itself. In a perfect world, I would probably have used just bone black and lead white. If it was, if I was following the exact materials. Because we do know that ivory black was made from charred skeletons back then. Not necessarily human, but, animal bones put into a crucible, if that's how you pronounce it, and then heated to such a point, then afterwards you would have ivory black. That's traditionally what would have been used. I think the pigment is a little different now. But you wouldn't even, I don't think you'd even notice the difference these days. So this is a really good lesson, I believe, in values. As we start to walk down, see one value here, another value here, and then it gets darker over here, as you see in the Vermeer. It gets darker over here towards the shirt. And now we're going to go in with a different brush. Pure Alkyd Titanium White. The collar will really start to sing. And of course we're setting this up for glazes. We're setting up the stage for glazes for sure. Now I'm going to let the brush strokes kind of touch. And now what I'm going to have to do is move this all the way across to try to get the exact light shape that Vermeer has. And then I'm going to have to bring the value down a little bit towards here. And then really bring the value down over here. So what I'm actually going to do is just go in with my halftone brush here and just let this do the work for me. So hopefully you can see the progression. And again, this is way different than the public streams. In the public streams, I would have already probably covered most of this. So these lessons are very step by step. So what I want to do is make sure that all of these edges are covered. Let's change brushes. So I'm definitely changing brushes a lot, so take note. Changing brushes quite often. I'm going to see if I can put this on the metallic portion of the French easel. It may not show on the bottom. Actually, on the camera screen, you should be able to see at least this little hook. So what I'm doing is I'm going to go back with the ivory black, clean brush, thin paint. This edge, I want them to meet. Of course, I don't want it to be that sharp, but in any case, I want the edges to meet wet on wet so that I can have full control over the edge quality. Now I see that the thickness of the collar can be greater. And though there's a lot of sharp edges in the Vermeer, I don't want there to be too many sharp edges yet in this stage. There's always time to build sharp edges. And already the Alkyd oil paint is settling in like immediately. This is almost touch dry. It's that fast. So that's why I'm kind of working one section at a time. Now, definitely got to clean the brushes. Notice this is almost completely touch dry. Super fast. And thanks to someone that has left a like in the lesson. Thank you. Now, what I'm going to do is look for another light that's similar to this one, but not quite the same. And also note that I do sometimes put a little bit more in the edges just to subtract into them. So meaning I did push this out a little bit more so that I can go back in. And it's just easier to work this way. Even though we don't see the edge like this in the Vermeer, it's just easier to work this way. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is take the same brush that I used to paint this, bring the value down just a little bit. So again, please feel free to ask me anything while the lesson is being filmed live. So I'm gonna bring the value down a little bit. So anyone that saw the behind the scenes and saw the painting that I'm working on of Pepper, my bearded dragon, I'm using the same approach actually. I almost always will do some kind of practice before I introduce a different material or approach. So that's why I suggest one section at a time if you're using these faster dryers. So now see how this is just one touch darker than this. And I'm not too worried about the specific brush strokes, the specific brush marks. I'm trying to get them as specific as I can, but giving myself room to go and correct later. Okay, so now I'm going to leave a little space here for the blue, the bluish tone, and cover all the way up here. Now you do see some of the kind of a brownish tone here, so that may be how Vermeer layered it, but we're going to just keep it unified. So we're going to keep it gray. And already the paint is tacking up, which is good. Meaning this will be dry, super dry, very soon. And the nice thing about alkyds is that they are actually fully varnishable after a month. Meaning you can use the Damar varnish. Of course, probably like the next week with these alkyds you can use Gamvar. But the nice thing about alkyds is you can varnish them after a month. But of course, the major trade-off is that they dry really fast and pretty much almost too quickly for most of us. So let me get this outside shape soft. See how I'm kind of pushing that brush stroke into there. Now what I'm going to do is clean this brush before I lose this brush. And get into the halftone brush. Before I use it, I'm going to clean some of the paint off of it. So it's a little tricky when you're using the alkyds. You want to be very cautious with the paint drying on your brush while you're painting. It's nowhere near as difficult as acrylic when it comes to drying, but it is something to take note of. So let's go ahead and now start to put in a shadow tone for the band on the head here. Now, just like with each underpainting, you want to be very, very soft. You want the edges to be very, very soft. And that's why you see the brush moving as much as it moves. Just so I go over something about 50 times in the span of what? A minute, just to really push a soft edge. Now see, this would be too soft if I left it alone. This requires a little bit of stability. Excuse me, stability. Luckily, I wasn't able to finish my coffee before I filmed, so my hand is not as shaky. It's also kind of a lesson on drapery. You want to follow the specific patterns, but they don't have to be exact as long as it's following the direction, the main direction. So now I'm going to go ahead and change values down here. Wait, let me cover this first. Okay, so I'm going to change values. And see, this is already starting to tack up, which is good. And tacking up just means starting to dry. But in all actuality, it just means it's getting kind of sticky. Not drying. And see how in the drawing I had this too high relative to this? So I'm going to be lowering this, make it a little darker. A little darker again. By the way, happy Monday to everyone watching live. I actually really enjoy Mondays. I'm not gonna lie. It's the beginning of the work week for me because I'm usually with family on Sundays. At least half of the day. I usually spend a little portion of Sunday doing some kind of work. Alright, so now that we have that filled in, we have this left because remember we're kind of going one portion at a time. So hopefully this large brush, whoops, I did forget to clean it. I'm gonna clean it with the turpentine, which I'm actually going through a lot of my turpentine. I may end up having to use Gamsol because I'm running out of turpentine. And I'm just cleaning off the brush before I reuse it. Just a little caveat of alkyds. So let me go ahead and get again, I have Winsor Newton distilled turpentine. Though I don't really recommend it if you don't have some kind of ventilation. Spike lavender is the very best you can have. Yep, happy Monday, Kathy. Yeah, for these purposes, spike lavender is definitely the best that you can have. So now this is going to be one value lighter. So see, I put a mark in there first. Oh, this painting is in danger of falling over. Hopefully it doesn't fall over. That would make this a action-packed lesson. So this needs to be one value darker, but not anywhere near as light as that. So that's a little tricky. And if we don't get the exact value right away, it's not a problem, as we are going to continue to develop this underpainting. So see how a little bit of distilled turpentine goes a long way. Now Gamsol feels like it kind of eats at the paint, whereas distilled turpentine and spike lavender have a nice feeling that they actually spread the paint versus kind of eating at the paint. But again, you can still use your Gamsol if you like. As I said, once I run out of distilled turpentine, I'm probably going to just use the Gamsol before I have to buy something else. Alright, so now you see how it's just a little bit darker than darker than this, but lighter than that. And there's even a little dark recess back here. So I'm going to go ahead and paint that in. And then once I cover this, we're going to go ahead and walk our way up towards the skin tones, which of course we're just going to leave pretty flat. And then go back in. So I believe this underpainting should take at least 2 videos, two lessons. Because we really want to focus on the surface with this one. So if you walk up to this one in person, in the mat, it's a very, very smooth painting. It's kind of like what you would picture with the Mona Lisa being super smooth. Now all of that drapery that you're seeing there can be simplified into just a few shapes. So right now I'm just covering the whole thing first. And then I'll go in with a darker tone down here for the most obvious halftone that I see. Then I'll step back a little bit. Notice another one. So there are 2 distinct markings here for the drapery that I'm putting in. And of course we can always add more later. But as I do that, I feel like I do have to push this a little bit darker before it starts to tack up. And now we have it. So now we're going to move up towards here. We want to compare the values. I want to say it's a little darker than this over here, but it's almost the same value on the shadow that we have here. So I'm going to go ahead, clean the large brush because we don't need the large brush for that area. And now we're going to start off with the shadow using this brush. And now let's see if we can get a similar value. So that's pretty close. And remember to leave a little space for the earring. And with the earring, it's all right if it's, not perfect. Because we're going to go in and draw it wet on wet. So again, you want to work one section at a time here. And of course, the surrounding skin tone value is going to be pretty light, but it's not going to be as light as the color. So see, it's pretty light, but it's not as light as the collar. I never realized how great of a lesson on values and value simplification and value harmony that this one is. So this one is definitely really good for learning values. Now just kind of running the brush into the paint to create this soft marking, the soft edge. See that? Almost like a ghost-like edge now. Now gonna go ahead and go in with the same brush, fill something in for the earring. Doesn't have to be too specific just yet. But we want some kind of mass in for the earring. Doesn't have to be too specific just yet. And now the highlight of the earring. The earring will be straight titanium white. There we have that. Now I definitely have to clean the old brush and move into the shadow on the face. So hopefully this brush, yep, it's starting to tack up. So I'm going to clean off this brush, get the old razor, take this off. So that is a benefit of the glass palettes, though I really enjoy the wooden palettes, as you know. And the shadow on the side of the face is about a little bit lighter here, just because of the reflected light. So we'll start with this to differentiate from the neck. And what this very kind of cold underpainting will do is once we have all the values and the drawing and the shapes that we want for the skin tones, it will then push the warmth of the glazes that we'll put in for the skin tones even warmer. So it'll create more of a color harmony. So a little darker. You want to be a little careful here. So I'm actually making it a little darker so that I don't lose the ear, the shape of the ear. I may have to even switch brushes for that. So I want to be very careful not to lose that shape for the ear. And this is a little bit backwards compared to how I usually go about underpainting. And I just painted my microphone again. I have a very colorful Blue Yeti microphone soon. Now it's going to get a little darker here. Now I usually say not to emphasize the reflected lights, but given that I've done this study before, this reflected light actually is quite important to the overall value organization. So see here, just a little bit darker up there. And as you're filling this in, you're going to want to have another brush, clean and ready brush to use right away. And I'll show you why. This is actually more flat. So alright, you want to have another brush on hand right away and mix in the dark light immediately. And of course, you don't have to have this kind of immediacy if you're using regular titanium white, meaning not alkyd based. If you're using Cobra, just straight Cobra, then you don't have this concern at all. You can pretty much paint this section that I just painted, go to lunch, come back, and it's still workable. Alkyd paint, no. If I don't cover this edge right away, this will be a sharp edge that's kind of embedded itself, and it's will be kind of difficult to get rid of. So you want to be very cautious with this. You see, if you keep it softer, you give yourself more room in the future layers to sharpen it up. And as we know, when you put your foot down on something, you tend to sharpen in terms of edges. So I'm purposefully keeping that rather soft. That was a mistake. This isn't lead white, so I can do this. The old finger paint. Actually, it was just subtracting. It's wild how quickly it tacks up. I can't imagine anything any faster drying than this when it comes to oil paint. Any faster drying than this, and it's pretty much acrylic paint. Now that we've filled that in, now we'll go and have another kind of relaxing session. So as you'll notice, different areas in oil paintings require different amounts of concentration and focus. So right now, while I'm kind of rambling along, I'm cleaning off the brushes. So again, clean these brushes off, and it seems like a burden kind of when you're using super fast drying oil paints, but it's really not. Especially for these kind of paintings, you don't want this kind of fast drying characteristic too often, but especially when you're trying to build a smooth surface, this is a very desirable medium to use, or should I say just paint. Very desirable type of paint to use. Now, it does appear that the layer underneath in the original Vermeer is definitely glazed over. You can see the blue is definitely glazed over this. So that means that it must have been lighter than the color that we're already seeing in the Vermeer. So I'm going to make it actually a little bit lighter than the shadow. So I'm actually not going to paint it the true value that I see it, so that I can glaze over it with the blue later and get a similar effect. But I do want to paint this accent in. Remember, an accent is when one form meets another form, blocks out the light, and creates something that looks darker, and that's an accent. And I almost forgot the change I need to make. Push this out a little more. There we have that. It's almost the shadow color of the face itself. It may even be a little bit lighter. And for everyone watching this live right now, I will also be doing a public live stream once I create the link. Not the link, but once I create the post for it at 5 p.m. today. Eastern Standard Time, so Maryland time. And not just Maryland time, but you know what I mean. Eastern Standard Time. What I would be painting, I have no clue. It seems like the public doesn't really... As I predicted, the public doesn't really have too much of an interest in longer paintings, as I saw with the finish of the Rembrandt. Not the finish, but with the development of the Rembrandt. Just between us, that Rembrandt from the last public session is not complete. It's complete for the video, meaning it's just not a good idea for me to film it anymore. But with the public, it's not as informative as this. But it's more of a kind of a fun painting hangout session. So now I'm going to fill in a light color for the hat, and I want it to be, not the hat, but whatever we're going to call this. It's going to be a little bit darker than I want the skin tone to be, because you know that Vermeer is known for his effective light, Vermeer has been called the painter of light, but a lot of painters have been called the painter of light, if we're going to be honest. But um, the thing I notice about Vermeer in particular is the kind of quiet, soft, ghost-like finishes that he has, and we're working our way up towards that. So that's the little accent. So to anyone watching live, has anything been confusing when it comes to the new number of lessons being uploaded and everything? Is anyone confused with the uploads? All right, so now what I'm gonna do is start to cover the face. And so what I want to do first is get the forehead, as always. But of course, using the alkyd oil paints, I gotta look for my brushes that have the alkyd on it. Clean them off as quickly as possible. And I apologize if you're getting any ads on this. It turns out when I shut off monetization last time, it shut off my chat. So I don't know what in the world that was about, but YouTube is a little finicky like that. If you see ads once this is pre-recorded, let me know, and I will turn them off. But it still gives us ads apparently. Even for my non-monetized videos, YouTube will add its own ads. Unfortunately, I've noticed. What's up, Kathy? Okay, I'm glad that you're understanding the uploads. There has been some confusion with the numbering, but I'm glad that you are following with the numbering. So if anyone, again, has confusion with the numbering, the lesson number pretty much just is a way for me to archive which lesson I'm on. So this is, for example, the 17th lesson, but this is project 3. So those are two different numbers there. The number 17 is just to archive which video I am currently on out of all of the lessons. The project number is just to archive which project I'm on so that I can put it in the playlist for you. So this is just a little bit darker than this. It's almost actually the same value as this. So they're pretty much nearly the same value. Alrighty, Kathy. You thought you have missed the lesson, so jumped ahead on the underpainting. Okay. Oh no! I saw your image, Kathy. And no. You were right. You were right in going in with the darks, the background. So you don't have to go back. You can do this fully with raw umber and titanium white. You can. So thanks for the question, Kathy. So it will, Kathy. Any oil paint that you use will be as smooth. You know, even the flake white will be as smooth. The only reason I'm using this right now, well, if I'm to be completely honest, the main reason I use the titanium white and the alkyd, let's see. Oh, you did an ivory black background. Oh, that's good. That's good. So yeah, you can do the ivory black background and the raw umber and flake white and the skin tone for the underpainting. That's perfectly fine. One of the reasons I went in with the alkyds, other than the fact that it's fast drying, is that it's just a little more cost effective for me. This would be a lot of my flake white that I'd be using to cover all this, and a lot of the ivory black to cover all that. But there's another little caveat to the alkyd ivory black, I will say, which I didn't really talk about, but I should mention, is that when you thin it out like this and see how it's becoming touch dry, almost touch dry, it's actually, whoops, it's actually not as reflective as the usual ivory black, you know, like the Williamsburg or pretty much any brand. I didn't mention that just because it doesn't really pertain to how a painting is documented as much, more about how it looks like in person. So just on a side note, the ivory black, when you thin it out, if you're using the alkyd based, it's actually less reflective. It's a little less reflective, but that kind of doesn't really apply to what we're doing here, because what we're doing here is through video, so you wouldn't even notice the difference through video unless my camera quality is like on point. So yeah, I know that it can be confusing now that we're starting to add more lessons, but hopefully the more lessons, the more projects, hopefully the more variety that you'll have. And also remember, you can paint along with any of my previous YouTube videos as an extracurricular painting activity. It's just the lessons are much more advanced in terms of the guidance. My previous YouTube videos, they weren't as instructional as these videos are. I'm putting in that half tone for the nose. And of course the nose needs to be lowered, but I'm going for what's the most obvious right now. And what we're going to do next time is, what I think I'm going to do next time with this is go in once again, kind of repeat everything with the underpainting to continue to build a soft surface. And Kathy, you can build a soft surface with the raw umber and flake white. You certainly can. And it also depends on which raw umber you have. Winsor Newton's is a little bit colder. And I think that Williamsburg is a little colder. Old Holland, I think, is a little warmer, which might be beneficial, but they're all going to be just as smooth if you paint it the same way that I'm painting this. Now as I paint this light on the philtrum, I'm going to move the nose down by moving the shadow down, because I do have the nose a little scrunched in my drawing. So I'm going to go ahead, get a different brush. Whoops, I forgot to clean this one. So hopefully this brush is all right. Hey, Kathy. Oh, you're using the Cobra. Um, the Cobra, I believe, is also a little bit warmer, which is similar to the Old Holland, so that's good. And it does dry a little faster, at least from looking at the charts. Because I had the burnt umber from Cobra, not the raw umber, but looking at the charts, you know how Cobra has the color charts. It should be a little bit warmer than the other brands I mentioned. But yep, Kathy, and anyone else watching, you can use Cobra just fine. Just make sure to give it enough time to thin out, or to dry out, sorry. Thin it out enough so that it dries in a reasonable amount of time. Alrighty, Kathy, so Cobra, Raw Umber, and Cobra Ivory Black. Yeah, perfectly fine. That combination, perfectly fine. Just make sure that you give the painting enough time to dry. If you paint it really thick, then it may take up to 2 weeks. If you thin it out with the spike lavender, as you mentioned that you have, then it may take even less time. So if you paint this way with the spike lavender, it may actually take about, I want to say 4 to 5 days. Because I noticed that when you add water to the water mixable oils, it does kind of make the drying time take longer. But I have used water mixable oils with the traditional solvents, and they do dry at about the same rate. So it does help with the drying if you use spike lavender, Kathy. All right, Kathy, so you have Old Holland Flake White. Okay. So yeah, I mean, if you do have the Old Holland Flake White and you have spike lavender, I would actually suggest getting the Old Holland Raw Umber as well. Now I have to be very quick to change this because I made the nose a little too dark. Very simple. Alrighty. Hey, Kathy. So you're only using spike lavender. Okay. Then that is definitely ideal. Again, spike lavender has a really rich history with oil painting. And this nose is very soft to the touch, so I'm going to keep this edge super, super soft. So Kathy, how are you liking the spike lavender? All right, so now I'm actually gonna go in. Oh, Kathy, so you love the spike lavender? That's awesome. Yeah, I need to stock up on spike lavender. I have like maybe 2 or 3 teaspoons left of mine, but I'm using the Rublev one. If you haven't heard, Kathy, I'm gonna type this out. Art Treehouse. This is actually where my friend Karen purchases her spike lavender. I think I may have mentioned it before, but Art Treehouse also makes really good quality spike lavender. I don't know if I mentioned them before. Oh yeah, yeah. It definitely helps to thin out the paint without kind of eating it, like odorless mineral spirits kind of feels like it eats at the paint. So I want something that's dark, but maybe 3 shades lighter than the darkest dark. And see, it still looks rather dark. Yeah, Kathy. Yeah, I think we talked about the Chelsea is really good. That brand is wonderful. I have that brand for my linseed oil. And I'm just mentioning Art Treehouse because I'll probably purchase the Art Treehouse. Um, it's a little, it's a little cheaper. Um, like maybe a couple dollars cheaper, but it is a little cheaper. But when we're going to talk about quality, Kathy, I think the one you have is probably a little bit higher in terms of what other people say. Um, Other people will say that the Chelsea is like one of the highest quality. So now with a different brush, let's start to put in the color of the sclera, or should I say the value of the sclera. It's gonna be a drop or like one slight tone lighter than the brightest light. And even this might almost be too bright, but I did bring it down a little bit, and you'll see when we put the highlight. You want to keep everything really soft. Really, really ghost-like soft. And now to show you that we can go brighter. Hey Kathy, so you got a set of Chelsea that had walnut, linseed spike, lavender, lavender brush cleaner. Wow, lavender soap, fat and lean medium, and the damask veneer. Huh. Wow. Now that's a pretty good set there. Awesome, Kathy. So yeah, to everyone watching this after it's filmed, Chelsea Classical Studio does make really good spike lavender, along with other mediums, as of course I'm using their linseed. And see now how I can go brighter with the highlight. You thought that this was probably the lightest light, but then I fooled you. Of course we have a whole nother step we can move up. So now I'm going to just kind of soften away. And correct my shape. I actually need a little more up here. That's a little closer. And now with the same brush, I'm actually going to darken it a little bit. Oh, the veneer is varnished. Okay. Oh, Damask? Did it? I think it auto-corrected Damar and turned it into Damask. But yeah, it's good to have the varnish as well. So now with the same brush, I'm going to start to put in these accents here for the tear duct. I'm thinning out the paint a little bit more. Now in the beginning, it's not going to be... Yep, it is the, yeah, the autocorrect. Yeah, I understood. It's the Damar varnish. So yeah, Damar varnish, that's the one that I use. And of course I wait 6 months sometimes. Out of laziness, I've waited longer. So now I'm going to go ahead and put in the, the darker halftone on the corner here for the tear duct, or the upper eyelid. And then make it lighter. And a little bit of a darker halftone here, the side of the eye socket. I'm going to leave this corner alone in anticipation of coming back into this with another layer of underpainting to again build up the drawing and the surface, and of course the values. But anticipate that the first time you cover the surface, especially with the pearl earring, with the underpainting, it's going to look a little strange at first. So it's like it goes through an awkward stage, but since it's a Vermeer, it goes through a really awkward stage. Now a value that's a couple shades lighter than the darkest dark, but still fairly dark. Starting to put in the dark accents for the mouth. And I should make note that I haven't used straight ivory black anywhere yet. Meaning I haven't gone in with straight opaque ivory black. You'll see what I mean in just a second. This value has not been used anywhere in the underpainting yet. But the range that we have in the underpainting itself is compressed between this and the brightest light, which is titanium white. So just to show, hopefully the palette knife makes it more clear. So now we're going to make it just a little bit lighter. Put in the dark accent underneath of the mouth. And now we're going to move a step lighter. Start to put in the lips. Now a step darker for the side of the lips. Now light again, but not overly bright, not as light as the skin tones. For the teeth, anyone wondering how to paint teeth, I usually start with just a unified light. Not very bright. One of the mistakes that oftentimes happens is we put in the straight white in for the teeth. Kind of like a commercial, like a toothbrush commercial, toothpaste commercial. We don't want to go in with straight titanium white into the teeth. And believe me, I've done that several times in the past by mistake. All right, so now that that's covered, I'm going to go ahead and start to look for anything that I can soften. Of course, we don't have to be too shy with the highlight, so we'll put another highlight here for the lip. So yeah, now I'm going to look for anything that I can soften and make less apparent. So for instance here. And the next time we go and work on this underpainting, we're going to make it even more specific. As I was saying, with this one, we're going to want to have a fully finished underpainting before we go into color. So I'm going to stand back and see if there's anything on the softness. Hey Kathy, the tongue. No, I don't think that this is her tongue. We'd have to zoom in. So Kathy, you could be right. We'd have to zoom in into the original, but I don't think that this is her tongue. I believe this is the model's teeth that you're seeing here. I'm actually kind of softening here. So yep, I'm gonna stand back and feel free to ask me anything. This is pretty much the conclusion of this layer of the underpainting. Right now I'm just going in and softening, and because this is Alkyd, I'm actually gonna have to just really quickly, if I can find my fan brush. Why is it that I always lose the fan brush? Actually, I think I see where it is. Give me a second. So with the fan brush, I'm just going to run it through just to push away anything that's too, I guess, bulky or too sharp. So Kathy, any questions before we end the lesson? And I should say that I'm going to, now that the stream is going to end, I'm going to go back into the original post. And since the stream has ended and all the live stream tier patrons have had the chance to watch this live, I will change the setting so that every student can see it. So Kathy and anyone else watching in the live stream tier, well, this is being recorded live. Any questions? Alrighty, Kathy, and everyone else that was watching in the live stream tier. That will be the conclusion of this lesson. Thanks for watching this live, and to everyone that is watching this afterwards as a pre-recorded video, remember you can send me images each week by Saturday night, 11:59 p.m. The virtual classrooms are now coming out on Tuesdays, so sometime around Tuesday evening the virtual classroom will come out. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, everyone, and I'll see you on the next one.